You know what I love? I love economics.
That they're telling about you that you don't agree with?
Well, I think one of the things that says, for example, about Donald Trump's economic policies is that somehow they're going to jack up inflation, which is rich coming from Kamala Harris, whose economic policies have directly led to inflation.
Tariffs are inflationary.
Well, not always, right? Let's just take...
They're either inflationary or people aren't buying the products anymore.
Well, let's just take one example. So one of the classic examples that economists use to attack, or some economists, I should say...
Never forget that the tariffs that Trump levied on China were so disastrous that basically all of the revenue that we got from those tariffs had to be given in aid to farmers to counteract the economic damage it did to them. $28 billion in federal aid to farmers, more than the Department of State got, or the nuclear forces, or NASA, just to counteract the damage that was done over the as a consequence of those tariffs. In 2018, U.S. farmers' soybean exports to China declined by 75%. And these tariffs were targeted. The tariffs that Donald Trump is advocating for now, up to like a 20% just across the board tariff, it'd be ruinous to a degree that I don't think you guys can understand. I don't think you can even fathom it. People love to you know, talk up how disastrous certain economic policies would be, and I know that we've gotten kind of accustomed to a nothing ever happens attitude with big seismic changes like this. This would be ruinous to a degree that you couldn't even begin to imagine. No, I don't think it'd be worse than the Great Depression. I think it would be probably more comparable to the 70s economic crisis. Or maybe we get 2008 all over again in terms of like relative economic damage. I don't really know. It could be like another '08. It could be like the oil shock. I don't know. I don't know.
Used to attack Donald Trump's economic policies is the tariffs that he imposed on washing machines and other dishwashers. So they show a chart that says, well, look, a few months after this tariff, the price of dishwashers went up a little bit. But if you look over 2 years, actually the price of dishwashers went down. You induced a lot of American factories to invest in American workers and American-made products, and the price of...
And yet we have not regained a local manufacturing sector. So where do those jobs come from? I mean, I don't know why I'm pretending that he can answer me. He's lying, so it doesn't really matter.
Dishwashers has actually lagged behind the price of a lot of other home appliances. So sometimes when you induce investment and capital formation in the United States of America, it does lower prices on American workers. And again, the experience of Donald Trump's presidency, he was president for 4 years. He did impose tariffs sometimes to induce more investment in American workers. And what happened? We had 1.5% inflation, rising take-home pay, and the best economy for workers in 40 years.
That's different than across the board tariffs, though.
But when people say that Donald Trump is going to destroy the economy, he was already the leader of the American economy for 4 years. We had rising prosperity, broad-based middle-class wage growth.
Senator,
that is
here from taxfoundation.org. The Trump administration imposed nearly $80 billion worth of new taxes on Americans by levying tariffs on thousands of products valued at approximately $380 billion in 2018-2019, amounting to one of the largest tax increases in decades. The Biden administration has kept most of the Trump administration tariffs in place, and in May 2024 announced tariff hikes on an additional $18 billion of Chinese goods, including semiconductors and electric vehicles. So the reason for this is because Biden wants to specifically develop the electric vehicle and semiconductor industries in the United States. I still disagree with these tariffs, but these are tariffs that are being targeted in sectors where there's already an effort to develop a domestic manufacturing base, you know? In this case, this is Biden desperately trying to protect our electric vehicles from the superior and much cheaper Chinese ones. The Americans must buy nothing but $60,000 Ford F-150s. So I still disagree with these policies, but it's part of a plan. An across-the-board tariff, like what the Trump administration is currently gunning for, psychotic. Absolutely psychotic. Do you have a take on the Nippon U.S. Steel buyout? All I know is that Nippon Steel is folded over 1,000 times to preserve both strength and flexibility. So I suppose that if they're buying out our steel, that means we're going to get a lot stronger. Much research to do. Can you prove that Chinese electric vehicles are superior? Sure. Google cost of Chinese electric vehicle and then Google cost of American electric vehicle.
It's a record I'd like to get back to.
Senator, I think the question, though, on the tariffs is, and it's where Joe is going, because they're across the board and they're not as targeted, it's unclear. There are certain industries that, unfortunately, we don't have. Now, would it be great if our country were to invest in some of these industries that we're...
I don't understand why he does this. This doesn't benefit neocons, doesn't benefit fascists. Why does he do this? There are two reasons. One, because it panders to the interests of the low IQ, you know, we're going to do everything in America, made in America, ha 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 crowd. And for two, and this is one that people don't like to talk about, you know, because it's a little bit spooky to think about, the modern bourgeoisie are a-national. You think that billionaires today are like rooted to a country? Corporations set up headquarters in other countries all the time. In reality, the economic success of the United States domestically isn't like a huge factor in many, like a ton of our billionaires and our businesses profit massively from the, you know, the manufacturing base and production in China and in Bangladesh and in India. I think that in truth, we're reaching a point where America's interests are being dictated by a wealthy elite who don't even care that much about America's economic success. You want to know other examples of this? The entire developing world. Bangladesh, most of, you know, Southeast Asia, most of Africa, countries outside of the imperial core, many of those countries are led by people whose ability to run their countries more or less depends on their willingness to be to capitulate to foreign capital. Latin America, this is a well-known problem outside the imperial core, right? Their countries remain underdeveloped as long as they remain I guess fertile vessels of investment for Western business. Folks, what happens when the imperial core stops being a nation and starts being an amorphous collection of legal entities that can change nations whenever they want? Well, then everyone falls outside the imperial core.
Not that we're missing on the manufacturing side, but the amount of time it may very well take to, quote unquote, induce every industry to invest here to manufacture. That's the complication with the plan. So when you see, for example, like a Goldman Sachs report come out suggesting that this actually becomes not just a massive tax, but a massive drain on the economy, what do you think? And then just a related question, because a lot of people have said this. Do you believe that the entire across-the-board tariff would go into effect, or is it should we think of it as some kind of negotiating cudgel, if you will, with China for other things?
Well, first of all, I do think that it's negotiation. Donald Trump is a negotiator. He believes in using tariffs for negotiation, but he also does believe in using tariffs to induce more manufacturing, more capital formation in our country. But Andrew, the problem with the argument here is when people say these tariffs are going to have an effect, Donald Trump already imposed specific tariffs on specific industries. You didn't see the negative consequences come to light.
Do you understand what I'm talking about when I say that? This is what people talk about when they talk about late-stage capitalism. Through the 1940s and 1950s, in the West, we saw a massive raise in the standard of living of the average American worker, in large part because of economic globalization. Now, all of the really shit work could be done by people in Bangladesh, people in India, people in China, people outside the... Well, not in China at the time, you know, like, you know what I mean. You could start exporting the really, really, really bad jobs. You could push them outside the imperial core to people who can't vote, right? Because no matter how mistreated an American worker is, they're still a member of our democracy, and they have the ability to sway the outcome of elections. So why not have the really shit work, the slave work, being done outside the country where they don't have that power, you know? Much of the economic development of the 20th and 21st century has been finding ways to maintain slavery, like in a de facto, like, what is the productive capacity of this group sense, without there being political consequences for it. So you move it outside the country. But eventually you reach a point where countries become so interconnected and capital flows so freely across borders that nations are no longer a route for corporate capital. Multiple trillions of dollars are held in offshore accounts, you know? The Panama Papers, we know about this. It's not a conspiracy theory, it's just a fact that we know about that nobody wants to do anything about. Tens of trillions removed from the economy, removed from taxation, because the wealthy just want to sit on it forever. In truth, we say Elon Musk is the wealthiest guy on Earth. We have no idea who the wealthiest person on Earth is. We have no clue. We know who owns the assets that are evaluated at the highest cost or whatever the. We don't know who really has the most money because that shit is off the grid. And as long as it's off the grid and all the productive, you know, the systems of capital acquisition are detached from any specific nation's well-being, you arrive at a system where, in effect, everyone is now outside the imperial core because the imperial core is no longer a country. It's a few boards of directors. You understand what I'm talking about? Now, I'm not saying that America is in the same position as Bangladesh when it comes to like relationship to imperialism and capital. I'm saying that, look, this is very, very, very simple, okay? Global proletarian solidarity. We are all up on the chopping block here, you know? We're all up on this. Ooh, Rothschild family, don't you denigrate my economic analysis with your half-hearted anti-Semitism. This has nothing to do with the Rothschilds or the whatever the fuck, okay? Go look at the Panama Papers. None of it's a damn conspiracy theory. It's all like facts. It's just plain factual information. And we should all be concerned about it. Mind you, the fact that our system is pushing the bourgeoisie in this direction, that does not mean it is a rational or sustainable direction to move in. As standards of living decline globally, so too will the portfolios of the bourgeoisie, you know? Like, nobody benefits from it. We're moving in an irrational direction in terms of capital acquisition. It's going to cause problems. It's going to cause problems.
In fact, what you saw was rising wages and rising take-home pay. So when people say you can't do this in a narrow way, you can't do it in a broad-based way, I just think...
So what's the end game? Eventually it's all going to fail, and then what? I don't know. What do you think I can read the future? Do you think this is the first time that a nation has been driven to ruin through the greed and short-sightedness of the investors who profited from that nation's resources and labor? Because that shit happens all the time, man. We're just not used to it happening here. Literally Rome. I hate you guys. This has nothing to do with Rome. We're not talking about an imperial collapse due to its own internal contradictions. We're talking about an external economic entity. Don't just immediately default to the first. Use your heads. I just said you think this is the first time a country has collapsed due to the greed of its investor class? What about Latin America? What about Southeast Asia? What about resource extraction in Africa? Come on. This has happened before. Use your damn heads.
Town. If the path to prosperity was flooding your nation with low-wage immigrants, then Springfield, Ohio would be the most prosperous country and the most prosperous city in the world. America would be the most prosperous country in the world because
J.D. Vance, my man.
Kamala Harris has flooded the country with 25 million legal aliens. What's actually happened is that over the past 3.5 years,
what happens when oil is too expensive to obtain? Okay, you're getting my goat. You're mistaking my basic class analysis for soothsaying. You think I can see the future? I can't. I'm only telling you. I'm only extrapolating from trends that we've identified, basic trends that we've identified concerning the relationship between capital acquisition, nations that are being exploited for their wealth and resources, yada yada. That's all. That's all I'm talking about here. I'm not saying I can see the future, okay? I don't know what's going to happen when oil is too expensive to obtain. I can't see the future. I'm just telling you to be concerned about this, okay?
We've had this massive influx of illegal labor.
Why do they always call them illegal, even though the migrants from Haiti in Springfield, Ohio are legal? I don't know. Curious.
What's happened? We've had skyrocketing inflation, lower take-home pay, Americans more dissatisfied with the direction of the country and the economy than they've been in a generation. This is not the path to prosperity, no matter how much a Wall Street bank says that it is. Now,
why does the Republican Party keep calling non-white immigrants illegal, even if they're objectively legal and here legally? Really activates my almonds. What do you think a president could do feasibly to make the American economy stronger now that this end of the imperial core problem exists? I'm not saying it's necessarily the end of the imperial core. I'm just saying that the prosperity of the United States of America is not really like a huge priority for companies that you would expect would benefit from that. But you know, you got to rein in the bourgeoisie a little bit. You got to bring them to heel. You know, speaking of things that correspond to the end of the nationalized imperial core, cryptocurrency is actually a pretty great example. Cryptocurrency might be primarily promoted by lunatics, but there's a reason why people like Peter Thiel are so interested in it. It's a perfect example of the kind of thing you can use to fleece people in a way which is completely divorced from the, you know, sort of national prosperity of the country that you live in.
Join me live on Twitter Spaces at 8 p.m. this September 16th for the launch of World Liberty Financial. We're embracing the future with crypto and leaving the slow and outdated big banks behind.
This is extremely low rent. Jesus Christ. How much can crypto really be worth? This is the best promo they can afford. Is this Trump coin? Nah, they probably just tossed him a $5 to promote it. It's probably not like Trump coin. Or if it is Trump coin, that's still pretty funny. He called it Twitter? Yeah. I mean, even Elon still calls it Twitter. No one calls it X. Cryptocurrency already exists in the form of online banking and debit credit cards. That's not... Cryptocurrency doesn't mean currency, but it's digital. It means currency, but it's crypto. I'm afraid you'll have to refer to a 2-hour Dan Olson video to get more from that, okay? One of my favorite Frankfurt theorists, Alfred Sohn-Rethel, notes there is a structural hatred of the working class by the bourgeoisie. Specifically, they need the workers, but also try to eliminate the working class out of the equation, e.g. automation to increase profits. The logical process of capital acquisition becomes irrational from a society standpoint. Yeah, 100%. I mean, we're already seeing that to a large extent. I mean, obviously, since they wrote in it. I think that this is a very provable theory. You know, I think we're already seeing the outcome kind of demonstrated. It's just a matter of how far it's going to go before something gets done about it. I say us like I'm a part of the, you know, I'm just a workaday Joe. I am, you know, I clock in at 11 a.m. every morning in the podcaster minds, you know, the streaming, the streaming factory. And I work hard. I get my sweat on. Vosh is the face of the downtrodden. That's true. I would say I am of a noble proletarian breed. I would say this.